Well, we now know that applications can be insecure if we're using setuid. Lots of other regions applications can have security exploits and issues. So Linux and other operating systems like Windows, etc., and Mac, they all give us mandatory access controls we can use to put guardrails around applications. I'm going to show you how to do that in Debian. We're going to use AppArmor. In other distros, there are other tools like SE Linux if you're using, has some of these tools if you're using a Red Hat based distro. And of course, you can use either package with either, right? If you like AppArmor better, you can install it on a Red Hat distro and use it. And likewise, if there's some features in SE Linux I want to use, I can install it on a Debian based distro. So we're going to use AppArmor again to put guardrails around this application. It should be installed by default in most distros with Debian. In the lab environment that we're using, it should be installed by default. If not, use apt to install AppArmor. You can also install the AppArmor utilities. I have some instructions to do that if you need it. So the first step for setting up AppArmor is we have to create what's called a profile. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So we are going to use VI to create the profile. To use sudo because I'm not logged in as root. I named my profile usr.bin.wttr because that's the location of my executable. So if I were to follow the path, it's usr/bin/wttr. That's our little sample application that we're going to put the guardrails around. That's just naming convention. You don't have to name it like that. You can name it whatever you want because what AppArmor is going to use is the actual path that you put in the profile. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. I'm going to just copy and paste here just to save some time. But and I'll explain what each of these lines is doing. I just got to end this. There we go. Put little curly braces around it. So this first line is saying basically that we can execute. So implicit execute of usr bin wttr. So that's how it knows the path of what we're allowed to execute. It also is going to allow us to read from that config file. So by default, AppArmor will not allow an app to do anything, right? So if I leave this blank, it'll have permission to do nothing. You can't execute it, you can't read anything, can't write anything, it can't do anything. It's restricted from doing pretty much anything. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that I can execute it, that I can read from the config file that I know it needs to read from, and that it can write to the output file that I know that I want it to write to because I put it in my config file and I know that's where I want it to go. So I'm putting this guardrail around it to say no matter what somebody does with the app, if they try to override that output file, I want you to block it because I only want the output to go to weather.txt that's in that var wttr directory. So it can't go to root, for example, right? Like we did in our exploit. So if I save this, I should be able to run a command that is going to basically load that profile. So that's what this command, AppArmor parser-r is going to basically say, go find this profile and load it into AppArmor. So now it should be protecting that application. So if I run the wttr command, notice that it gives me an error message here. It says libcurl4.so4 is denied. It can't open that, right? So WTTR worked fine before I used AppArmor. Now I turned on AppArmor, even though I set permissions on those files, I'm getting this error message. What this is telling us is that AppArmor is restricting our application from being able to use those libraries, from being able to use libraries at all, right? So one way to fix this is to add permission to use libraries. So I'm going to add another line in here, and I'm just going to use copy paste again because it's going to be faster, but I'll explain what it is we're doing here. So this should allow it to load libraries. Usually libraries in Linux are going to be in usrlib or in /lib. MRIX is basically saying it allows memory map, read, and execute of those libraries. Now I could, if I wanted to, limit it to specific libraries. I could say only this library is allowed, and I could specifically put curl in there. But I know this app is, it's only compiled with one library, right? I compiled it. I only passed it one library, so I'm not too worried about it. But in theory, if you wanted to really lock it down, you could do that. All right, so let's go ahead and write that, and we're going to have to reload this profile. And let's see what the next error is. So now it gets a little bit further. Now it says that it couldn't resolve the host name. Kind of interesting, right? But think about it. This app is being restricted from being able to do anything. Anything I want it to be able to do I have to add explicitly as a something that it has permission for. So for example, if I wanted to be able to access the network, I have to add that in here. So I have to put in here network. So now it'll be able to access the network. So before it was trying to get to the network, can't do it. Now I'm going to run the app again, still can't resolve the host name. So this is one of those things about AppArmor, is it's kind of a cat and mouse. You're trying stuff, and then I'm going to show you, because eventually what you'll have to do is use the log file. And I like to add a -t so I can see the timestamp. But this should tell me what's being blocked, right? So I can look in this file, and you can see down here, here's all the stuff that's being blocked. So you can see down here, it looks like it's still blocking some network stuff. I can see that OpenSSL is being blocked, so it can't create it can't use the SSL libraries. And I can also see that it looks like from these messages, I think it's also blocking it from using DNS, right? So DNS is being blocked. So we're going to have to go and modify our file again. So we know that network is now allowed. What else do we need to add? Well, we know SSL was blocked, so I'm going to go ahead and try to add SSL in here. So this should allow it to read from the SSL files. Got to reload the profile. We'll run the command again. Still can't resolve the host name. And if I check my log entries, so starting from the bottom up, notice now I can see this is getting blocked, right? So now I know I need to add this to that file. So I'm going to add that and see what happens. So let's go back to VI, insert another line. Again, I'm just going to copy paste to make this faster. Magic of videos, right? All right. So now it's going to have permission to that file. Let's reload and try it again. Hey, there it goes. It worked, right? So this time it was able to run. And if I want to verify that it ran, first let me check the current date. So right now it's 21/21/12. Great album by Rush, by the way. And then I am going to check the var. Actually, we're going to do -l so we can see the date and time. Var WTTR. And you can see it did at 21/21. It wrote the weather.txt. So now at least I know WTTR is working. And if I go into WTTR and now I try to output to, let's say I try to write to root. Where do I want? I don't know. I'll just call it test, right? So I'm going to try to output to root test. That gets permission denied. And let's see if AppArmor is what denied permission. So I'm going to go into dmessage again. And in this long list here, you can see right here, this is where it denied the write access to root test, right? So it denied it. Now it also denied a bunch of other stuff, but it worked anyway, right? Even though these 4 things were denied, it still worked. Now, could I allow that stuff just so I don't have a lot of junk in my logs? Of course. So if I go into VI, we're going to append another line here. And again, I didn't need this stuff, but according to the log, it's getting blocked. So for some reason, it's trying to use this stuff and getting blocked, but it still works even though it's being blocked, right? So it doesn't need this stuff, but I can still allow it. So we'll go in here, reload the profile, run WTTR. Now if I check my messages, so you can see at the current timestamp, which is 21/22/50, that last one, the only item in there is the status that I reloaded the profile. There's no other error message in here. However, if I use the WTTR command and try to output to root test, it gets denied, which we expect. And I'll see that where it denied that write access here on that last line item, 21/23/13, and all the other junk is now no longer there. So it works. So we're able to put these guardrails around the application. It's going to protect from that exploit that we used earlier in the previous part of this assignment. And now you have some idea of how to use AppArmor.